Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Spectrum, Every Age, Every Need. I am your host, Shawn Francis, and I always say that it sounds like it's probably, I don't know, maybe people get tired of hearing it. They wonder how authentic it is, but I am exceptionally excited about uh, today's guest and today's show because every episode is an adventure because we touch on things that some of us may have taken for granted or not seen before. But we're going to jump right into it. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Spectrum. All right, before we jump right into it, I want to make sure that we thank our community partners. I want to thank everyone within the sound of my voice for taking the time to tune in and join us. And our community partners, first and foremost, Billy Footwear, who is they are a maker of um, adaptive footwear for all. The founder, Billy Price, is an amazing individual and an amazing story in and of himself. He had a catastrophic accident that left him paralyzed in his first week of college, had to learn how to do everything for himself all over again, and did so with the exception of putting on a shoe. A prototype was built, Billy Footwear was born. They've sold over 1 million pairs of shoes. Great company with a great story. If you look for the link in the show notes, you will get 10% off your final purchase with them. And we also want to thank our community partner, Soul Grain Granola. They are an amazing company. Um, they are a women-owned and minority-owned company that makes fantastic tasting granola that has no junk in it. I don't know how else to put it. And they've got some amazing flavors and a great story with in and of itself as well. And if you click on the show notes, you will get 10% off your purchase there. And then I also want to welcome a new community partner, which is MeetBea. If you're wondering exactly what MeetBea is, I'm going to tell you in a very condensed manner. You'll find out in a deeper manner as soon as we get into conversation with our guest today. But this is a service that helps those that have challenges with uh, structure, organization, and things of that sort. And if you click on the link in the show notes, you will get 10% off your subscription. And you will also find out after we jump into the episode here that I have done a very feeble job of explaining exactly who they are and what they do. But the person who is better equipped to do so is the founder and creator, Mr. Eric Hundley. Eric, welcome to Beyond the Spectrum.
Thanks for having me, Shawn.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So, before we get into exactly what Meet B is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Every superhero has an origin from where our powers come. So, let's start with yours. And we usually find that those are things that bring us together and remind us that we have more in common than otherwise. So, why don't we start with that, especially since it's what connects us and it's also what's played a role in the creation of Meet B.
Sure. No one ever calls me a superhero. I come from
Well,
a
you know something? That's the other thing I didn't say. The first qualification for being a superhero is being convinced that you're not one.
ah, well, thank you. I'm humbled by that description. I come from a pretty dull, normal background. Actually, I grew up in the '70s and '80s in a middle class family in the Midwest outside Chicago. Father and mother were able to provide for me, and we had all the essentials and a vacation every now and then, but definitely came from a pretty typical suburban modest income family. My dad was a instructor at a community college. My mom was a village clerk, handled bookkeeping and such for the local town outside Chicago. I was an only child and lived in that world until I went away to college and kind of experienced some things that I didn't growing up. So, from an early age, from 18 and beyond, I was expected to do some things independently.
Mhm.
I My father came from a military background. He was, I guess, what you'd call squared away. I look back fondly. My parents ran a really tight ship. They
Mhm.
Every Saturday, for instance, I could set a watch at 8 a.m. when the village allowed you to turn on your lawnmower because of the
Hmm.
noise ordinances.
Oh wow.
I would hear the lawnmower go on at 8 a.m. exactly. I would hear the sound of bacon and pancakes being made in kitchen.
Hmm.
Right around the time that was done, my dad was done mowing the lawn. He would come in, we would all eat breakfast together, and then he would go outside and wash the cars. And that was my earliest exposure to a very structured routine growing up. It was lists and check the box. And, at this age, you were expected to be here. At this age, you were expected to be here. So I grew up in a pretty structured environment um, with just good, decent Midwestern parents.
Right. Right.
We weren't without our problems, but not nearly to the extent that other families maybe struggled with.
Now, when you say village, is that not unlike what I think I only hear of in Michigan, but like township and things of that sort?
Yeah, they're small sort of suburbs of big cities like Chicago. In the Midwest, they call them villages
Hmm.
or townships. But yeah, that was where we grew up, about 25 minutes outside of the city center of Chicago.
Okay. All right. Great. Great.
And
And
for
and
those
you,
of you wondering, I was a Sox fan. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so that the Mason-Dixon line between Sox and Cubs fans, I was on the south side of that.
gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Good. All right. So sticking with chronology here, you talked about that was your experience like before going off to college. So what was that like, and where'd you go to school and where'd you study?
Uh, Went to Southern Illinois University for my undergraduate, and then Eastern Illinois University for my graduate studies, just general business.
Hmm. Okay. Now, what led you had you leaned towards general business? And this is a two-part question. And then the other is, did you have any idea what you wanted to go to school for and what you wanted to do? Because I was one of those people growing up that, especially coming from the Caribbean, from the Virgin Islands, where education is like everything. For me to be, it's not odd to not know what you want to be growing up, but so many people, everybody I knew was at least getting their 4-year degree, if not going to law school and or med
Right,
school. So I felt like, gee, if I don't know what I want to do or what I'm supposed to do, that's more
right.
like it. I didn't know what I knew what I was supposed to do, but not what I really kind of wanted to do.
I
How did
really
you
didn't have
feel
a
the same?
clue.
Wow.
I knew this. I knew I was expected to go to college because my father was able to, through the U.S. military, get the GI Bill and go
Yep.
off to college himself. And he worked in
Hmm.
factories and grew up in the Great Depression. And it
Yeah.
was just, you're going to go to college. There
Right.
was there was no like alternate path. Basically, like, we expect you to go to school. We don't expect you to go to Harvard, but the University of fill in the blank. It was a big joint, right? They wanted Big Ten, Pac-12, something along those lines.
Right.
And you will study something that leads to a paying job. Now, like most 18-year-olds, you have these ideas about how the world works, right?
Yeah.
If I go back to the 80s, I think I, at some point, was going to be a famous disc jockey on the radio, or I wanted to be the captain of a large cruise ship, or, all these crazy
Yeah.
ideas you have as kids. And then you get to college and you're like, well, someone pulls you aside and it's like, no, that's not the path you're on. You're going to love accounting 101, or something along those lines, right?
Right. Right.
Just
Right.
something, you got to remember, my background was this sort of, you know, Midwestern traditional, don't paint
Hmm.
outside the lines.
Right.
And, like, go for the solid, predictable career, basically, was the advice I got. And I was happy to do that. I knew I wanted to live a comfortable life. And,
Hmm.
somebody at the business school said, well, come on, follow me. We're going to, finance 203 or whatever. And then,
So is that what led you to do what was my next question? Is like, okay, you fulfilled parents' wishes and went and got your 4-year degree, but I don't know if you went right after, but after the undergrad, you kept going. What is that
right.
what kept you going, or was it shortly
So if
after?
memory serves me right, there was a professor, uh, as I was graduating, that said, boy, the job market's not great for recent graduates. you got to stick around and do a fifth year and get your master's degree. You can be my teaching assistant and get it paid for. You just have to pay for your own apartment. And, as a young
It's only
man,
one extra year.
yeah, as a young man, I thought, well, that's pretty nice. I don't have to go out and adult right now. I can hang out and do a fifth year. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what I did. There was no master plan behind it other than I could delay going off into real life for a year.
Wow, wow. I appreciate that honesty, and that's interesting. And it makes sense. I would have
Yeah.
thought the same thing. The only thing with me is that, you know, I liked school socially, except for when I was asked questions that I didn't know the answer to and that kind of thing. So I didn't miss a lot of classes or anything, but I struggled academically because I was always mentally absent, just someplace else. But I
Right.
think if you can remain present enough to get decent grades, you can kind of go to school as you go along and and figure it out. So what then takes place after, build the bridge for us, if you will, between finishing college, um, your postgraduate stuff, and the creation of uh, cognitive scientific, which then leads to the creation of MeetBea.
Oh, sure. Boy, that's a big jump, Shawn. So, you know, after graduate school, I went back to Chicago. I had met somebody who I eventually went on later to marry, and our plan was to sort of, hit the next marker, which was move in, get our jobs, get married, have kids, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And we did that. I moved back to Chicago after college, and got a job that most young business grads get, which is working in an office. And I remember someone pulled me aside and said, hey, come into this department, and they put me to work. And fast forward, I was skipping along very nicely in the corporate world, doing things that were expected of me, right? So I was getting promoted every couple of years, and along with the money that came with it. And in the back of my mind, I had always uh, said, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what everyone sort of hopes for, right? It's nice family. You grow up in the house in the suburbs, then you go off to college, then you go get the job and you start your own family, rinse and repeat, right?
Right.
But there was always this nagging sense in the back of my mind that I should be doing something on my own where I get to drive the decisions. And
Mm.
then babies come along, and necessities, right? There's like,
Right.
oh my gosh, we got to pay for the mortgage, and we got to pay for the kids college. And I was happy to do all those things, and I did that for a lot of years. We were able to move into a beautiful home, afford the vacations, afford the college tuition, and all that goes along with it.
Right.
In 2019, some really rough family problems came to a head, and my wife and I wound up divorcing, and my two kids were getting to be about college age. One of
Mm.
them was going off to college. One of them was soon to go off to college, and a lot changed. I was really downsized from the corporate world. In my almost my 50s. Um, I had a child go off to college, and the relationship with one of them has been spectacular. Like, we are best buddies. Sadly, the trauma that was occurring in our household greatly affected one of my two children, and we have a very distant relationship now, unfortunately, through not because of lack of desire on my part, but she's made some choices to go live her life, and I I would love to say that I've learned a lot from that experience. I think in many ways I have, but it's been very traumatizing, and partly inspired me to go into business for myself. So, working with things that could drastically improve the outcomes for families going through difficult situations.
Wow. Well, I appreciate your vulnerability there. Let me ask you. Well, again, as I think we talked about this before, we go as deep or shallow as a person wants to here with their story. How did that situation inspire or affect your desire to then reinvent yourself or work for yourself?
Well, reinvention sometimes is forced on you. You know, when your entire identity is being this suburban family parent and going into the office and, you know, sort of taking the kids to soccer when they're little, seeing them off to college. You know, you have this sort of idea of what life is supposed to look like if you're successful, right?
Right,
And I use that term loosely because you may have some, you know, shiny awards like the nice house and the nice car and the job and everything, but there's more behind that than just that validation that you're doing things right, right? So um, I myself had to learn some independence. I joke around after my divorce. I found out just how independence challenged I was. Little things like, you know, making a meal. Like we had definitely a division of labor in our household where I would do certain things, she would do
yeah,
certain things, and now all of a sudden I'm scrounging around looking for, like, gosh, how do I make a how do I make a good meal for dinner? You know, like just little
yeah,
things. I'm on, like a lot of folks on YouTube, Googling how to prepare a healthy meal for yourself. You know, just things that we all take for granted that seem to come so easy. But when your systems are disrupted, all of a sudden become challenges, right? Um, and then I think at some level that affects everybody, right? So, you know, whether it's something as unfortunately typical as a divorce, right, where you realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do some things now that I haven't had to do while I was married,
right.
to a tragic accident happening where now you have to learn to walk again, right? There's definitely a spectrum of difficulty with some of this stuff, and um, I think the thing is, are we taking advantage of all the tools at our disposal to weather those changes, right? And weather those times of our life where we're all put in positions where we need to challenge ourselves to do difficult things that you've never done before, or maybe things that other people were already doing for you that you needed to learn yourself.
Right.
So that's what inspired me to get to this place today. Those journeys that we all go on, and not just seeing my, you know, experiencing myself, but I really became very aware of the struggles that other families go through with all sorts of difficult seasons in life.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's something else. So tell us about, and I'm just going off the cuff here because part of me, I tempted to jump into MeetBea, but tell us about, because you didn't decide I'm going to start this thing called MeetBea. You started the company first, Cognitive Scientific, and
Mhm.
then went from that to creating the service of MeetBea. So tell us how we now know what made you think of creating Cognitive Scientific, but then tell us what that is, and then the bridge between it and MeetBea, if you will.
Sure. So Cognitive Scientific was born because I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I could go off on my own and start my own company. And that was something that I had personally always wanted to do, but never took the risk to do because I was very comfortable in my former life working in a corporate environment with the family and everything. So, um, you know, I didn't want to start something before my kids were done with college. I didn't want to have that phone call where I said, "Hey, Dad's business idea didn't work out, so, you know, come on home and go to the local college." You know, so I didn't want to put them in that position, so I got them launched, and I started this company around the idea of behavioral health and finance. So I come from a background of working in finance and behavioral health. So Cognitive Scientific was born of the idea of creating products or services for families that struggle with either one or both of those issues. Really more of behavioral health, though.
Wow. Okay, that's something else. Okay, so and when was Cognitive Scientific founded?
Well, it was in the works for a couple of years, but really I started it in mid 2025 formally. and began building our first two products, which was software apps called Be Insight and Be Connect. They're all under the umbrella of MeetBea. That's our website.
Okay, so they're under that. Okay, so go ahead and tell us about what MeetBea is, and then I'll share the site in a moment too, for those that are watching on our YouTube channel, or that will be watching on the YouTube channel, as opposed to those who are listening on any of the other platforms.
Sure. Well, I was witnessing a lot of in the behavioral health world. There's lots of resources, especially if you live in big cities. People think about, for instance, a psychiatric hospital, right? Or an outpatient clinic where people come just during the day and don't live at night. And then there's a host of different, region in every region. There's mental health outpatient residential facilities. There's detox facilities for people struggling with drug and alcohol use. People think of a physical location, but in the last few years, there's been a lot of mental health and special needs, substance abuse and alcohol related technology to make services available to people that aren't in a traditional clinical setting. Either they're designed to support those clinical functions, or they are sort of general wellness apps, like Calm comes to mind, or Headspace, kind of in the mental health area. I wanted to design something that was not to replace a clinician. I really believe that proper support with people that struggle is best delivered by a qualified professional like a doctor or a licensed therapist or a social worker, or just a supportive environment in general, maybe group, things like AA meetings or NA meetings. This is designed really to supplement that. So as I traveled around talking to families that have had people who they love and support struggle with either a neurodivergent or developmental disability, something like autism, ADHD, maybe Down syndrome, people that struggle to support somebody with a mental health related issue, psychosis, schizophrenia, really serious stuff, drug and alcohol abuse,
Right.
which is very common, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of general non-clinical, they used to call it failure to launch, but now it's, really better described as emerging independence. It's typically a young adult who struggles to hit the markers of traditional independence. So moving out of your parents' house,
Right.
being able to not only get a job and keep a job, but the ability to pay your bills, go on, complete your education, sort of all the things that our adults are traditionally expected to do independently of their parents or another loved one.
Mm.
Well, as I was talking to families, the responses were really, really consistent with what they were struggling with. It was, look, I love pick a person, my son, my daughter, my brother, my sister who lives maybe in another state. Maybe somebody they support who's a close family member, but maybe not necessarily related to them. They're caregivers, right?
Right.
The story was over and over and over. What I heard was, I love them. I want to support them. I give them support, but it can be a handful sometimes. So it was that caregiver burnout. And you would ask them, well, what's the problem? And, you got a good cause here. You're trying to help somebody you love. And they said, that's not it.
Right.
While these populations are very different, right? Somebody with autism doesn't struggle with the same things necessarily that someone does with a substance abuse problem.
Not
Somebody,
directly, yeah.
right. Somebody with psychosis, severe psychosis or schizophrenia doesn't struggle in the same way that somebody who is just not self-motivated enough to get themselves to college or a job, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
all very distinct issues that they're dealing with. But
Mm-hmm.
what they do overlap is they all struggle with independence in a way that like 80 to 90% of the population doesn't. So you look at 80, 90% of the population, they set an alarm every morning because they're grown-ups and they have somewhere to be.
Hmm.
It's typically a job. It might be school or the military, but it's someplace productive 8 to 9 hours of the day,
Right.
right? And they know to get dressed and make the bed and shave and shower and eat a healthy breakfast and get in the car and get there on time because that's what's expected of them.
Hmm.
And then they do the tasks that are necessary to make them successful at that job or school.
Right.
And they, because they're able to do that, they can keep a roof over their head, they earn a living, they can pay their bills, they don't lose their apartments or their, they can pay their mortgage. They get to the gym. When they get sick, they go to the doctor and they take the medication that's prescribed to them because it's in their best interest to do that, right?
Right. Right.
And at an extreme level, they they don't get arrested for doing things that they shouldn't be doing in public.
Hmm.
um, they're not uh, look, stuff happens to everybody in life. Everyone has periods of their life where they struggle, but they traditionally don't sit on your couch and just live there for 2 3 years at a time, not looking for work or not contributing to the household, right? But there is like 10 to 20% of the population, depending on which one of those populations you're talking about, that really struggle to live the same life of dignity and independence we're expected to do every day without our family constantly stepping in for us.
Hmm.
So, what I kept hearing from people was, I love them. I want to be supportive. Heck, I'm even willing to support them financially for a certain amount of time until they get on their feet.
Hmm.
But it can't be forever. And I really want some accountability for this. If I'm going to be paying for their rent, or if I'm going to be paying to um, have them buy groceries or go back to school, I need to know that if they're struggling with alcoholism, that they're going to their AA meetings every week. Or if they're struggling with a severe mental health impairment, going to their doctor and maintaining medication compliance so that they
Right.
don't um, backtrack, right? So
Hmm.
we all want to see these people win, and we're all mostly supportive of them, but the constant nagging, the constant checking, the stress of like, gosh, did they do that thing that I asked them to do? Like re-enroll back in a job training program.
Hmm.
Are those things getting done? I don't mind supporting them until they can get back on their feet. But if I come home and they're not doing those things, we have a real problem, right?
Hmm.
I'm frustrated. My spouse or significant other is frustrated. A lot of times that's a big source of stress where um, partners don't agree on the best way to tackle the problem with their loved one,
Right. Right.
or siblings are fighting because they're like, gosh, one of our siblings isn't doing well and I want to be the tough love person, and no, I think we should baby him a little bit. And it was across demographics, it was across socioeconomic statuses, it was really from jail to Yale. You would see all types of people from low income all the way up to some really wealthy families who really were struggling with the same thing and using the same type of language. We love them. We're there for them. We want them to get better. But boy, I really need to see some. Um, I need a bargain, right? I need a bargain. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, which is support you. But I'm going to need you to do those things necessary that get you doing the things that we're all expected to do without my continued help.
Wow. Okay. Well, I like that jail to Yale. I haven't heard that before. Um,
Yeah.
so, okay, walk us through how MeetBea works, and then at the same time, let me know if there's a difference between um, a family with a loved one that has a substance abuse problem that would use it versus the way it would be used by someone, a family who has a loved one with, say, a severe cognitive disorder, like severe autism or something of that sort. If there is a difference between the two, walk us through how that works.
Right. So it's a mobile technology. Some people will access it through their mobile device, like an iPhone or an Android phone. Some people will access it through a desktop computer. But it's really an app that is open to anybody. It's a subscription, but I wanted to make this accessible to the widest possible number of people that I could.
Hmm.
Um, Even our most expensive version of the subscription is, just a little bit over $1 a day for most families.
Okay.
Um, so, what would upset me working in the behavioral health community in a clinical setting is, um, if you have good insurance, you can generally afford a higher level of care. But a lot of people don't have decent insurance and have struggle accessing services that could cost $20,000, $30,000 a month. I've seen some high acuity mental health related facilities that are $100,000 a month cash pay. Very few families can access that level of care. So, number one, I wanted to make this meet people where they were, right? So, most people have a mobile phone, and you know how it is now. There's an app for everything, right?
Right. Right.
And people are very comfortable working in that environment. So I wanted a support network that would be in the palm of your hand for a very accessible price. Um, Another thing, too, I wanted to make it a mobile solution because you and I might live in a big city like Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And if we need access to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, we could open the phone book or Google search and have 50 really highly qualified professionals within a 20-minute drive of our house.
Hmm.
But for some family living out in a rural area in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska, for instance, the nearest psychiatric support might be 50 to 100 miles away.
Right.
So I wanted to make this very accessible for people that don't live in communities where resources are readily available, and in urban areas too, where there's healthcare deserts, right? So
Right. Right.
um, the way it works is, let's imagine that you're my big brother,
Hmm.
and um, you want to see good things happen for me,
Right.
and you say, look, Eric, I love that you're wanting to do better, right? I love that you're wanting to beat, let's just say, alcoholism, for instance.
Right.
But I see how you struggle with it. I'm willing to help you until you can get back on your feet. Maybe I've been living with you on your couch or in a spare bedroom and it's time for me to go, right?
Right. Right.
Maybe I borrowed your car and busted it up because I got a DUI and got arrested and you had to bail me out in the middle of the night.
Right.
Um, and, frankly, you love me, but I've become sort of a headache and you don't want to get rid of me, but you want me to be doing things like, geez, Eric, it's time for you to get your own apartment and get that job and use that education that have, maybe I haven't been fully using, right?
Right.
You can say to me, look, Eric, I'm willing to support you. And that level of financial support is really a personal decision for you.
Right.
It might be $50 a week.
Hmm.
It might be $100 a week. You might say, look, I'm willing to pay for to send you back to college. Maybe I'll give you $1,000 a week or whatever that looks like. That's a really personal decision on how you're reading the room with me.
Hmm.
So you're willing to once a week go into the app and put the money into a locked digital wallet.
Okay.
And the money is there. And you're saying, I will do this for X amount of time. You might tell me 6 months, a year, whatever that looks like for our situation.
Hmm.
But Eric, I expect every Monday, because that's how we have designed the system. If, by the way, people challenged with independence generally do best when you give them money on Mondays.
Right. Okay.
Um, for instance, like giving me money on a Friday if I have a drug addiction is not a good idea,
Right.
right?
Right.
Instinctively, gosh, he's going to have that money spent by Sunday morning.
Right.
Monday is really a good day to do that. So every Monday, a 24-hour countdown clock happens where I have to
Hmm.
go into the app and complete 21 questions that are relevant to my struggles. So if you have identified me as having a mental health challenge,
Right.
that impacts my ability to live independently.
Mm-hmm.
That would be questions as important as, I have not thought about harming myself this week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have stable housing for at least the next 30 days, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
become homeless, right? The last thing you want to do is lose track of me, and next thing you hear, I'm homeless
Right.
or housed. I'm taking my medications as prescribed. So I'm self reporting my progress on the path to independence. So all those important things that you're trying to manage for me now are managed within the app, right? And I'm having to, on good faith, answer those questions as honestly as possible. At the end of answering those questions, if there are any red flags, you're notified as my supporter. And I have to take a selfie that's current. So within the app, you have a current picture of me. So if I'm living away at college, for instance, and you see, gosh, Eric, this is especially, you can tell some people don't present um, like they're, some people present as if they're struggling, for instance. So
Right.
flat affect can tell you some things about my mental health. Um, it can't diagnose it, but it can give you sort of a warning that, hey, something doesn't look right here. If you've ever seen a picture of somebody in active meth addiction, they look a little different, right?
Right.
So you can get a current sort of proof of life photo, if you will, of what I'm presenting as, and you can see the answers. So I submit those questions. You get a weekly report card that will tell you whether I'm hitting those markers that I'm expected to hit in exchange for your financial support. Now, that financial support is immediately released to me. So
Okay.
we're on a trust but verify system here. So
Okay.
the idea is it's a social contract, right? It's you saying, look, if you're honest with me and are moving forward, I will continue to support you with this incentive. But then if you get results and you look at them and they're inconsistent with your lived experience, you
Mm-hmm.
can adjust those incentives
Hmm.
inside of the app. So it's trust but verify. And what we hope to be at in hopefully a year or 2 years is for to constantly be iterating the technology where some of the exciting new technology, especially around the areas of artificial intelligence, can really sort of act as almost like a lie detector test within the
Mm-hmm.
app
Yeah.
and set more red flags. So, Shawn, the way I built this, it was designed to be like your home monitoring system. So we
Mm-hmm.
all used to have a smoke detector, right? But now we have these home monitoring systems.
Right.
It's it's linked to like the security company, like an ADT or a Brinks or somebody like that. But it can
Right.
also be linked to your fire department and your police department. And if it's like ours at our house, it links to all of our phones. So
Right.
I get it, and every other household member gets an alert if something's potentially wrong. So what does that look like? It's something's beeping, right? So what's the first thing you do when you hear your smoke detector beeping?
Yeah. You get
You
up, take a look,
right.
investigate.
It's always in the middle of the night too, right? But
Right. Right.
um, it's never convenient. But it like you want it to beep, right? And what you do is you sit up in bed and you go, something's maybe wrong here. And instinctively, the first thing you do is you smell for smoke, right? And then if you don't smell smoke, you get up and walk around the house and you go to the kitchen. Boy, did somebody leave the stove on? Is the kitchen burning down?
Right.
Um, is it somebody breaking into the house? Did one of the kids just leave the door open? Right? Did the dog get out? The point is you don't know exactly what's wrong just because it's beeping. But what it does do is it prompts you to investigate a potentially serious problem before something occurs that you don't want to occur. Like you hope, like if there's smoke, you could put out a little smoke little fire on the stove before the entire house burns down. And
Hmm.
that's what I had in mind when I designed this. Was I wanted a home monitoring system essentially for families struggling, so that before you send your kid off to college who struggles with mental health, before they fail out of school and you lose an entire year of tuition, right? A pretty expensive check you just wrote, right?
Hmm.
Um, Before they get arrested and you have to bail them out on serious charges, before the stress of caretaking destroys a marriage, right? That you would be able to address these problems on a weekly basis in a structured way where there was a reward system and an accountability system in one.
Right. So it's a structure and accountability service, essentially. Is there two questions then? Is there a free tier? And then I guess a question and a statement. Is there a free tier? And then and then for the subscription models or tiers, what do those look like?
Sure. So there's two versions of this. There's B Connect, which is a simple one-on-one connection between you and I. So it's a sponsor and what we call a member, who is the person you're supporting.
Hmm.
So that supporter or sponsor and the person they're supporting are the only people on that tier.
Hmm.
And that's typically for people that are independence challenged and they might need some improvement, but you don't need much more than just a simple check-in.
Okay.
That's a $16.99 a month check-in.
Okay.
Um, that does offer a 7-day free test drive or trial period where families that maybe want to test it to see if it works to their liking can go on there and get the first 7 days for free.
Okay.
The B Insight tier is enhanced reporting, so you get much more than just a simple answers to your sponsee's questions, right? You get deeper look into the data behind it, and you can see trend lines to see if very specific things are trending upwards in the way that you would expect. Like medication compliance is a huge issue.
Right.
So you can see, like, oh my gosh, they've been medication compliant for 6 weeks, for instance, right? So higher level of reporting than the lower tier. And then the nice thing about the insight is if you're dealing with somebody who needs additional support from outside people, you can include them within the app to support you, Shawn. So, for
Mm.
instance, in our example, if you're my brother and you're helping to support me during this journey, but we have a sister who maybe lives in Ohio, far away, but she's got a vested interest in me getting well too.
Right.
She's getting the same data that you are and can help jointly caregive to me from a
Mm.
distance.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, you might also say, well, gosh, I want Eric's therapist on this thing, or I
Hmm.
want his sponsor at AA on this thing.
Right.
Or if I've had contact with the criminal justice system, you might add my probation officer to make sure that he's seeing the progress, or
Okay.
my lawyer, right? Or
Right.
it's really anybody you, Shawn,
Hmm.
thinks that as a team you want helping to manage and care for my recovery.
Right. Anyone that you want to invite as a stakeholder.
Yeah, you are all working off of the same data. You're not
Mhm.
miscommunicating. And
Right.
I built that tier based on some anecdotal kind of stories that I would get from families where I'll give you an instance. There's a family that we know where they have one of their adult daughters lives away from home at college, and she struggles with what they call dual diagnosis. So she's got some substance abuse problems and also some related mental health related problems.
Oh, okay.
And she's been in and out of college where she failed out of college a semester, had to go home for a year. They had $50,000 of tuition down the drain because mom and dad didn't even communicate under the same roof. They didn't
Mm.
want to tell dad because dad was like the tough love guy and
Right.
would want to yell his way out of the problem or make demands, and that scared the
Hmm.
daughter.
Yeah.
Mom was kind of the softy and said, "Well, we're giving her time to adjust to her new environment."
Good cop, bad
So
cop. Yeah.
mom and dad couldn't even agree under the same roof what the path forward looked like,
Mm.
and they let the house burn down essentially, right? The
Mhm.
problem got so bad that they had to hospitalize their daughter,
Mm.
and it was at a very expensive level of care they had to go because they were I don't want to say that anybody really can't acknowledge the problem, but they defer the problem or kick the can down the road. Like,
Right.
oh, let's give it another month and see how it goes. And nobody's working on the same timetable. No one's seeing the problem as it is. My hope was by getting everybody on the same page, looking at the same data, there would be less disagreements on how to handle a serious problem. Look, if your house is burning down, you just got to put out the fire,
Hmm.
right? You might have an argument about whether to use a bucket of water or a fire extinguisher, but like, let's look at the big picture here. We have a big problem on our hands. The house is going to go up in flames unless we put this fire out.
Right. Right.
Let's just put the fire out. So
Hmm.
everybody can come to some sort of general frame of reference on what the problem actually is and how to tackle it.
Wow. Okay. So what you might have answered this already, but I want to play devil's advocate and ask, because I don't know that the situation that you just mentioned probably doesn't apply to the following question, because it sounds like a situation like the one you just mentioned is one that is extreme, whereby the app, its use is a little more obvious. Let's say for someone whose situation is not as, um, maybe say, as dire, but they want a
Mhm.
certain level of both, structure and accountability with a loved one, regardless of the reason. If they want to incentivize that person, through accountability, and money, so to speak, what would the benefit be? Why would they use MeetBea as opposed to just using Cash App, Venmo, or Zelle, or whatever? It says if you do this within such and such an amount of time, you'll get your allowance. If you don't do it, you don't get it. Why would they? What would be the benefit of utilizing MeetBea for that as opposed to doing that on their own?
Yeah, so Zelle, Venmo, Cash App, Apple Pay, all excellent ways to move money. And we actually use a similar technology within the app. But that doesn't solve the hard part, which is the accountability,
Mm.
right?
Ah.
Um, when you're financially supporting someone you love, the conflict isn't usually sending the money. The
Hmm.
technology exists to send money. I could open my phone and have money in your checking account in 10 seconds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's constantly having to ask, did you do everything that we agreed to? And that's where the relationship becomes strained, right? So,
Hmm.
the app facilitates the transfer of information first, right? Those questions that sometimes don't get asked every week. I mean, you would have to assume that, look, a supporter, I think, has good intentions and says, well, I'll send you money every week, but I expect you to go to college. I expect you to get a job, whatever that looks like, right? I expect you won't get arrested. But
Right.
in reality, what happens a lot of times is those promises get unmet, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Or worse, the person you've agreed to give money to isn't being truthful with you.
That was my going to be my next question, which is I'm gathering, I'm asking, my wheels are always turning. So I'm asking questions and getting answers, and from what we're saying here, because my first thought was, okay, so we know why someone would use MeetBee as opposed to just some kind of other software that we mentioned that's out there just to send the money.
Right.
But then the question comes about, what if you're dealing one on one with that person and yeah, I took my medication, and they're not necessarily truthful about that? That would be a situation where you would want to increase the number of participating stakeholders for that particular reason. Is that fair to say?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's an easy one, of course. And look, unless it's a unless you've just got a really good rapport with the person you're speaking with, you're supporting,
Hmm.
um, maybe that's the tier for you, where it's just one on one,
Right.
right? You're doing sort of light duty, right? Like this person's showing a lot of progress, and maybe you step them down to the lower tier or whatever. But especially people that have chronically struggled with these challenges, I
Hmm.
always say, look, it takes a village, right? Like,
Right.
it's always nice to have that supportive sister in Indiana or Ohio who's checking in too, right? Or
Right.
you got mom and dad on the same page now. A lot of divorce, you think about it, half the families are divorced now. Managing a child who lives between them sometimes independently, like 3 days a week on, 4 days a week off, whatever that looks like. Now everybody's communicating with each other through the app, seeing the same answers, right? And what you're really talking about is, what is the app doing? Well, it's easy to say the app's the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
And it can be, but you want to lead with the carrot, not the stick, right? The carrot is that incentive, like, hey, we're going to be truthful to each other. I'm going to do my part, fund this thing, help you get on your feet again, or
Hmm.
help move you to independence.
Right.
But I need you to do some things for me too. That's ideally how I want families to have the experience of using the app. But the app is also, I don't want to call it bad guy. Let's call him the stern father, right? The stern father that says, "Boy, you missed your check-in. It's a tough lesson, right? But
Hmm.
you're not getting your incentive this week."
So they
You
get a notification reminding them if they haven't checked in with the stakeholder.
Yeah, every Monday morning at 12:01 a.m. Monday morning, there's a an email that goes out, says it's your check-in window is now open. They go in the app. There's literally a 24-hour countdown clock
Right.
running, so that prompts the brain to take action, right?
Yeah.
And they have until 11:59 p.m. Monday night to complete it. And if they don't, the money is not released from the app. So that was a very controversial feature within the app when I first started discussing it with people.
How so?
I would oftentimes hear, particularly moms, because moms manage a lot of household issues with kids
Hmm.
and such. They'd
Right.
say, "Well, I'm such a softie. My kid would just call and beg and go, oh, please, mom, I forgot,' or there's no reason to forget. They're getting notified that they have to complete this, right?"
Right.
And they say, well, how do you deal with somebody who struggles like this, but then doesn't complete the check-in? And I kind of smile and I said, it's a tough life lesson. Picture your first job as a teenager. Like, a lot of us have that first job at McDonald's or whatever, where we have to clock in. And what does that job teach us to do? Right?
Be responsible.
We are learning responsibility.
Hmm.
We have to be somewhere at the time we're expected. We have to dress the part, present the part,
Yeah.
and we have certain tasks to do. Um, I remember my first job was at this wedding banquet hall outside Chicago, where we're bussing tables and pouring water. 16-year-old job stuff, right?
Right.
And boy, I was saving for a car. I really wanted that car, right? I wanted that red Mustang, like every teenage kid in the Midwest did.
Hmm.
And I remember one time I just blew off work. I decided to stay at Six Flags with my friends.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to say I got fired, but I missed that paycheck.
Hmm.
And it was a tough life lesson, because I remember the guy who ran the place, he had something to say about that.
Did he? So he found out.
Well, yeah, one of his people just didn't show up on time. And they had two weddings going, and, you know, they had, you know, prime rib to put on the table, and drinks needed to
Yeah.
be filled, and, all the stuff. I was supposed to valet some cars or whatever the job was at the
Right.
time.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I decided in my 16-year-old brain it'd be a lot fun to stay at Six Flags with some girls. And
Did you call in or did you just not show?
well, this was pre-cell phone, so
Yeah,
I think I passed a message through one of the more responsible kids that
yeah.
I was running late, but I'd be there by the time the wedding started. So we had to come and prep.
Ah,
And crazy thought like that somehow that would be okay, right?
right, right. It's a
And
bigger lesson because you didn't keep a promise to yourself, much less to him. So there's a bigger lesson because you said you would be there by a certain time and then weren't. Yeah.
right, I didn't do what was expected of me, right?
Right.
We had an agreement. He would pay my paycheck and I would do the job.
Right.
Simple as that. And it was pretty
Yeah.
black or white. I remember he was a old Navy guy and didn't have a lot of time for my excuses about chasing girls at Six Flags, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember that day was a very tough lesson to learn because it was embarrassing. I got
Right.
sent home. I show up and he goes, "Well, we don't need you now."
Oh, you did show up. Yeah.
Well, late.
Yeah. Right.
And, you know, in his stern father look, he was just sent me home. He's like, "We didn't need you now. We needed you 2 hours ago during setup." So,
Right.
he goes, "By the way, if this ever happens again, you're not going to have this job."
Right.
And I'm sure the only reason he gave me the grace of learning that lesson was he had much more wisdom than I did and realized 16-year-old boys don't always make good decisions, right?
Right. Right.
Or
Right. Yeah.
the smart one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Uh,
maybe he saw a little bit of himself in me at 16 and
Probably a little bit of both.
right. But
Um.
it was I definitely did not get paid that day because I didn't uphold my end of the bargain.
Right. Right.
And I look, I don't want to simplify the issue. These are people struggling with um, clinically difficult issues to solve in a lot of cases. Um, so I don't want to, negate that part of the story.
It's different but related, though. Yeah. It's
It's
understandable.
related in the sense of like, look, you need proper care by professionals, but this will supplement that and do the things you need to do between the appointments with the professionals that are so important. It's those moments that matter between the appointments with the paid professionals,
Hmm.
the psychiatrist, the psychologist. It's one thing if I bring my kid to their doctor's appointment one
Right.
day a week, but then they go home and unwind all that progress by doing other things that they shouldn't be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Um. So two things then. So the first one is there is and you and I talked about this off camera. So there is presently a fee to load the wallet. If you can tell us what that is, but then the good thing is that you believe that as this grows, that um, you're thinking that in a year out, that would be able to be eliminated because obviously to provide that service, it costs. It can't be,
yeah,
yeah.
so there's two parts to it. There's,
Mhm.
obviously a subscription that you would pay for like any subscription, Apple
Right.
Music or, any one of the apps that you're on that, the CNN app, you pay a subscription. You pay a modest monthly fee for the cost of the app. And then
Right.
what you fund the digital wallet with is really the only person that makes that decision is you as the supporter.
Hmm.
We have a minimum of $50 per week. One, to try to keep the transaction fees reasonable, but also because you have to be willing to provide some financial incentive to motivate the people to do all these things. So
Right.
you as the supporter would fund it at whatever you want. And then right now the experience within the app is very similar to any other app you download. Like for instance, I just got my $10 a month Apple Music subscription, and they add the little credit card processing fee. We're no different than that. So
Okay.
pretty standard. It's no more, no less than any other app with the processing fees. We will. One of the things that I'm really excited about is, and we're working on it currently, the non-financial incentive besides just a cash transfer, right?
Right.
For instance, in the future, I'd love to be able to offer something, and we're planning on something like this where it's a non financial incentive. It's still an incentive that costs money, but it's a non financial. So you might say, look, I'm not going to give you money, but I'll buy your groceries once a week, and I'll
Right.
send you $100 Walmart gift card for the groceries, or something like that, or I'll pay for your Uber rides.
Right.
You know, so the technology out there exists, but right now we are focused on this first version where it's money, right? And we picked that because it's an easy transfer of incentives, right?
Yeah.
So everyone universally loves getting a little financial incentive to do something, right?
Right. Right. Might there be an opportunity in the future to do what you just mentioned by partnering with other entities like, you know, grocery stores, ride share,
Yeah,
restaurants, or whatever have you, where it's tied to it directly?
I would love to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't know what kind of role I could play in that, because anyway, anything that helps people, I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
as
listen, everybody has different needs. What I may not need $50, but boy, I'd love for you to pay for my college tuition, for instance.
right, right,
You
definitely,
know,
definitely,
Well,
yeah.
that's really, you could use your imagination. People are incentivized by all different things.
Hmm.
So what we will be doing in the future is widening those incentive choices so that you can customize them based on the person who you love,
Great, great. And then
right?
if you, hmm
But
go ahead.
right now, no one's complaining about the money.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So go ahead and give the actual website.
Sure. So if you'd like to look at it, go to www.meetbea.com. So meet is MEET, like you're meeting somebody, and B is BEA. So B stands for Behavioral Encouragement Assistant. So B is, you saw our B spokeslady there. That's our supportive presence throughout your journey on the app. So you see her a lot throughout the app. And what we hope to do is eventually have B become a greater part of the encouragement. So that might look like a chat bot within the app, or video support, pops up. And, we kind of designed B to be sort of like your cool older sister who's been there and done that, right? She's gonna walk you through this, and that journey, whether it's with substance abuse, alcoholism, a mental health related issue, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's just emerging independence,
Right,
where somebody just needs some additional support transitioning from being a juvenile to be, or a teen, maybe to adulthood with the responsibilities that go along with it.
wow. Well, as I promised you, the time went by very fast, as it always does. It flies when you're having fun and adding value, hopefully. I want to thank you for being here. Before we wrap up, um, we have, at the previous show, I had one question that I asked every guest as we close the show out. And we call those legacy questions. And so, not sure what the legacy question is going to be for Beyond the Spectrum. I've got like seven of them that I'm going to try out, see how they hit and resonate. Hopefully
Okay.
so. So this is the first one that I'm throwing at you. If you could help the world better understand one thing about the people that you serve, what would that be?
They're somebody's son, they're somebody's daughter, somebody's mom, dad. Um, I think we see people that struggle in society in a very Hollywood way. It's the drug addict who's sort of the dirty guy in the alley shooting up a needle,
Hmm.
and it's easy to walk past those people. Or maybe it's a young adult who's just a little bit different,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They don't have some of the social connections you and I enjoy. They kind of are loners. They struggle with their classes. They have difficulty making connections with people, or
right,
doing simple things that are frustrating that you and I do naturally, right? Things as
right.
simple as maybe getting a job, right?
Hmm.
And keeping it. Um, my hope that the legacy of this is that those people become a greater integrated in society, and that they get a lot more grace to be who they are.
Yeah,
Um, Look, we're all, whatever our thoughts are on these struggles, I think we can all agree that if it happened to a loved one of ours, that we would be cheering for them and we would want to be supportive, but we would also want them to do the things that we kind of think of as being natural to us.
You said
Um,
something. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so my hope is that we find a place at the table for some people that are just a little bit different having these struggles. They all
Yeah.
deserve a place. They don't deserve to be ignored or um, denied opportunities in society. I think everyone deserves a chance, and I hope that this helps move those folks along.
Well, anything we can do to help accomplish that, it's we welcome that opportunity. And you said something that really stood out is you didn't talk about society. You didn't talk about them just simply fitting into society, but you talked about society allowing them to fit in, to meet them halfway. And I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning on my workout, and I heard someone make a comment that was such an obvious observation, which is any opinion that we usually have generally about a people, a culture, a place, a country, whatever that first impression is, that's the one that usually lasts. And that can be a good thing if we have if it's an accurate representation. But if it's not, you see then where the problem lies. And it just reminds us of everything that we talk about, with this show and why it was created, and which is to look at everything that we have in common and realize that we have more in common than we do otherwise. Everyone wants to be seen, needs to be heard, loved, and know that they matter. Questions are more powerful than statements, and we need to try and be a little bit more childlike, less childish. Um, for those of you, again, you can click on the show notes to support our community partners who offer great services and products. That would be uh, Soul Grain Granola, and then Billy Footwear, and now MeetBea. If you click on the show notes on those links, you will get 10% off your purchase. And we thank you for your support. And to each and everyone within the sound of my voice, thank you and we love you. Eric, glad to have you here.
Thank you, Shawn. I appreciate being on.
Thank you.